Okay. Uh, Understanding behavior as easy as ABC. This is part two, function of behavior. Thank you so much, Jacquelyn.
Thank you so much. So as mentioned, this is our part two, and with this presentation, we'll be discussing next steps on the functions of behavior. And in behavior analysis, this is just a fancy way to say reasons of why my behavior happens. So as a result of today's webinar, you should be able to have a better understanding of the reasons of the functions of behavior. So you should be able to identify first the four functions of behavior. You should be able to provide examples of functions of behavior, and you should be able to determine a function of ABC of behavior using ABC. So be able to have a clear picture of the whys of the behavior. So let's do a quick refresher on ABC analysis, which is what we did in part one. So ABC is a tool to break down a situation by looking at the three different parts of the circumstance. First, the antecedent, what happens before, the behavior of interest, and the consequence, what happens after. So let's go over an example. So in this situation, we see the antecedent would be a class is sitting at their tables, opening up lunch boxes for lunchtime, and the behavior we're interested in that is really causing a disruption in our classroom is Jimmy pushes out his chair and starts to pour out toys from bins around the classroom. And then as a consequence, we see all the students start to yell. The teacher is looking at the students and they're telling her teacher, look at what Jimmy is doing. So that would be a breakdown of a three-term contingency of what is happening in the classroom. So now that we know what ABC is, let's take it a step further. So ABC tells us the whys, but what are these whys? Those whys are the reasons of behaviors, the functions. I'll be giving you an introduction to these functions. So when you break down a situation with ABC, you can boil down the motivation for the behavior into four different reasons. And the four reasons are sensory, escape, attention, and tangible. And a way to remember this is by using the acronym SEAT, SEAT. So think this. You want to keep your kids in their seat, happy and ready to learn. And to keep them in their seat, we have to understand why they're doing what they're doing to not be in their seat. So let's break them down one by one. So the first function that we'll be going over is sensory. This is the S in our SEAT acronym. So this function is the only one that is not socially motivated. It might be the tricky one. Just remember, this one doesn't need someone's response or consequence to motivate you to engage in that behavior. So sensory behaviors are actions that feel good to oneself. So these actions typically replace discomfort or you experience a pleasant sensation. So some examples include scratching an itch, humming along to a song, hand flapping, jumping. When you do these actions, you don't need somebody else to do them for you. This is just something that happens and you receive some type of sensation from them. So let's go over an example of sensory broken down into ABC. So in our first example, so you have students working in small groups with a teacher and a teacher's aide leading an activity. And the student, Patty, she hums to herself the tune of her favorite show. Right after and during these small groups and the instruction is being provided. And the teacher's response to her humming is to tell Patty to please let the other students hear her and for her to answer. So, what would we want instead? That humming is really disruptive, and we know that she doesn't need anybody else, right? She is just doing it because she likes hearing that song. She likes that sensation in her mind or um, in her head of humming. So, what would we rather her do instead? So, when we're working in small groups, looking at now the second part, the green part, you would rather have Patty answer as part of the class, with our consequence being a praise from the teacher. And then right after everyone answers their question, they're given a break. And Patty would be better suited to hum during that break than during that classroom activity. So let's go to our next function, the A in our C. So the next function we will be reviewing is attention. So attention behaviors are behaviors that are seeking an interaction or some type of feedback from someone. Attention can be positive, such as when you receive praise from someone, or attention can be negative, such as when you receive some type of reprimand. So attention also doesn't have to be in the form of words. So it can be even a look from someone or even laughter from peers in the classroom. Let's go over an example of attention now broken down into ABC. So in this situation, we have teacher asking Tommy if he's enjoying his lunch during lunchtime. So Tommy responds to his teacher. The behavior that we're looking at is Tommy opens his mouth and shows his chewed up food to his teacher. And the teacher responds by saying, Tommy, that's not polite. That's the attention that is being given to Tommy. So, what do we think that Tommy is trying to say by opening up his mouth, right? Maybe trying to get a laugh out of the teacher, maybe trying to have some type of interaction in that moment. So, what would be a better way for him to seek attention? The teacher asks Tommy if he's enjoying his lunch, and he will respond by swallowing instead of showing up the chewed up food and saying, Pretty good, Miss Wilson. And then our consequence will be the teacher smiling and walking away. So he'll still get attention, right? But he'll get it in a different way. Let's go to our next function. So our next function is escape, which is the E in our C acronym. So escape behaviors are behaviors that avoid what is being asked of you when you abandon what you're doing, whether that be a task or even a simple instruction. So it's being asked to do something and just avoiding it completely, or when you're already in the task, walking away from that task or doing something so that that task is ended. So these behaviors commonly look like your student running away, pushing away work, making up excuses when asked to do something, or even bothering another student so they're sent to the office and essentially they don't have to do the task at all. So this can also be behaviors they do when they're also in the task. They may start doing the work and then halfway through, they start displaying all these behaviors. So escape is not just avoiding the task, it's also being in the task and wanting to leave it. And this is what we commonly see in the classroom for a variety of reasons. The work may be too hard, something is different in the environment that is kind of bothering the child, but this is what we commonly see. So again, remember, when we want to really figure out what is happening, why we're seeing the situation we're seeing, we do our ABC to break it down, to find out our why, and then now what we're learning today, our functions, is going to tell us which why it is. So now for our escape situation. So in this situation, Mr. Smith leans close to Sam to explain the worksheet that's in front of her. So Sam leans into her teacher and presses her forehead to Mr. Smith's chest with force. Mr. Smith responds, our consequence here is that he tells Sam to please focus, and then he continues his explanation to her about the worksheet. So here, what is Sam asking for by pressing against her teacher when he's asking her to do work? So in green, now we see what she should be doing. So we know that she is pressing her forehead against the teacher to delay that task, maybe to deter him from asking any more questions, maybe to ask her, oh, what's wrong, right? To not have to do that work in that moment. So if she is trying to convey, I don't want to do this work right now for whatever reason, what would be a better way for her to communicate that? So as soon as he leans in, looking at the bottom of our chart, our second chart, as soon as he leans in to ask about the worksheet and presents that task demand, she should respond by maybe touching a visual on her desk to show that she needs a break. One of those little visuals that say break. So his consequence would be there is he's understanding that she's asking for that break. So he places a timer on Sam's desk and says, I'll be back in 5 minutes. So instead of her continuing to get frustrated, we are able to understand this child's needs. We know that they're asking for escape. Now moving on to our fourth and last of our functions, our T. So tangible behaviors are actions your students take so that they can be given access to an item or activity to be able to go back to it. So some common ways that behaviors motivated by tangible are displayed are when a student grabs a toy or food from a peer, maybe crying when they're told no to something they asked for, or even running back to an activity that was ended. So this is all centered around wanting to continue doing some type of activity or being able to gain an item that they want, whether it's something that they asked for or whether something that they were doing that ended. Breaking this down in this situation, we have students at recess and there's music playing during recess. The music is turned off and everyone is told recess is over. Our student Susie responds to this antecedent situation by repeatedly stomping her feet while yelling, "You're not the boss of me." And our consequence here would be the teacher tells her that she had time to dance already and that recess is over. So the consequence that's being given is a definitive end to the activity. So, what would have to happen to get Susie to stop stomping in that situation? Probably giving her the music again. And that is what indicates to us that is a tangible function. So looking at our chart in the bottom with our green, what would we want her to do instead? She's upset because she's not able to have this music. We can't necessarily give her the music in that situation. It's time to transition. So a better situation would be they're at recess, music is playing, music is turned off. Susie responds by engaging in the behavior of walking over to the line to go back to what we need to do while complaining. Oh, I was having so much fun. So instead of her stomping and yelling all these things to the teacher, we can just, have her complain. It's completely understandable. She wants to have fun. So the consequence here would be instead of the teacher telling her, "Oh, it's done. We already are all done with what we need to do." We just explained to her, we can have another dance party tomorrow. Oh, I know, it's okay. So that's another way that we can kind of address this tangible situation. So let's go over some case examples. So our case number one would be Mrs. Johnson's second grade class is outside for recess. Some students are playing catch, others are digging in a sandbox, and another group is playing with toys by the bench. Wesley, our student, is walking around and she goes up to one of the girls in her class and hugs her so tight until the little girl starts to complain. Then teacher Mrs. Johnson goes up to Wesley and tells her to let go and be nice to her friends. Mrs. Johnson then asks Wesley what she wants to play, giving her options, and she even walks Wesley over to her chosen activity of bubbles. So in this situation, you are complaining, "Well, I always have Wesley at recess. She's hugging all these other girls. It's always a problem." If we were going to break this down, how would we first break it down to figure out the why? This is how we would break it down. Our antecedent here, students outside at recess, and Wesley's walking around. That's exactly what's happening before our behavior of interest. Then our behavior of interest, Wesley tightly hugs her classmates, which is a problem because the classmates are complaining. And then what's the consequence? What's the teacher doing right now? She's separating the girls and has Wesley play something else. So what is Wesley trying to say with her actions? She's probably saying, "Hey, I'm bored. I'm bored. I want to play, but I don't know how to play. I don't know where to go." So we don't want to see that hugging. What we would rather see instead is her going up to the teacher and saying, "I'm bored." So we know that she's looking for attention. What would be another way to get attention? Going up to the teacher, whether the teacher plays with her, the teacher takes her to go play something else. But that first step of needing help and needing that interaction, she would seek it out another way that is not the hugging. So continuing, let's go to our next case study and our last one for our examples. So we have Mrs. Teagues. She's in a fifth grade classroom and her class is independently working on math worksheets. She is walking around the class, making sure everyone is working and providing help as needed. When she reaches Ruth's desk and the empty worksheet in front of Ruth hugs Mrs. Teagues tightly while smiling and laughing before her teacher can even talk to her about the assignment. So Mrs. Teagues laughs with her and thanks her for being so sweet and reminds her to focus on her work. And Mrs. Teagues responds by walking away. So let's break this down. What is the situation? What happened right before her behavior of interest? There's an independent math worksheet that needs to be done. That's what everyone is working on in the class. Ruth responds by hugging her teacher. That's her escape response. Then the teacher responds by asking her to focus and walks away. So Ruth was able to get out of the situation. She knows if I'm really sweet and I hug my teacher, I'm going to be able to delay this a little bit more. And that's not what we want to see. So here we're going to change it up and we're going to see how the consequence can change behavior as well. So as soon as Ruth hugs her teacher, Mrs. Teagues is on to her and she knows, oh, this hug is coming because Ruth does not want to do this activity. So the teacher can respond by empathizing, hugging Ruth back, and then she asks to see her work and provides that help right on the spot. So Ruth doesn't have to delay the situation anymore. She won't learn that continuing to be all sweet and hugging her teacher gets her out of her activity, and we're able to give Ruth the help that she needs. So I want to give a little disclaimer. So behaviors may be multifunctional, or they begin as one function and they can evolve to another. So this is just something to keep in mind. You may want to tackle your behavior as if it's escape, but maybe it turns into attention. So it's just something to consider. Our major takeaways for today are that functions of behavior are reasons of behavior, why they're happening. Function is another word for reason. We can hypothesize these reasons from our ABC breakdowns, and the 4 functions or reasons of behavior can be remembered using SEAT. S for sensory, E for escape, A for attention, and T for tangible. Thank you very much for your time. This is my contact information if you would have any further questions. This concludes today's presentation and we'll now take questions. So please remember to use the Q&A button or chat to ask your questions.